Hey, Tim, thanks. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to start on slide 6. And what I thought I'd do today is explain a little bit about DigitalX. We're flying quite under the radar. And how I would describe us is a company that operates at the intersection of finance and technology, and the space that I call the transition to Web3, which I believe is the greatest economic opportunity of our generation. Once I go through the opportunity and the market size, I'll talk about our long-term strategic objectives. I'll talk about our short-term revenue drivers. I'll go through our revenue model and our product roadmap, and then I'll talk a little bit about ESG. So firstly, I thought I'd start with the opportunity. It's a very nascent industry that we're operating in, and a lot of people don't really understand the blockchain space. So earlier in the year, Blockchain Australia had a conference, and at that conference, it was named the mainstream moment, where what we're seeing is large financial institutions are starting to pay attention to blockchain and the industry that we're operating in. And we believe that we're at the very beginning of this rise to mainstream finance. Now, that's the first tailwind that we have. The second is what we call the Web3 economy. Now, the easiest way in 10 minutes for me to describe the Web3 economy is Web 1 was when we used to just chat online and send emails. Web 2 was when we built financial rails and started shopping alone on our couches with credit cards. And Web 3 is where we meet our friends in the metaverse and pay atomically. Atomically is the asset settling at the same time as the cash part of the transaction. We go shopping in the metaverse with our friends and pay for goods and services atomically. That for me is the easiest way to describe it. And then around that are all sorts of opportunities like tokenizing data and real world assets. And a few other things that we'll go into a little bit later into the presentation. We also see an opportunity as operating to what we call the new impact standards, which is the new focus on ESG, environmental, social, and governance, I should say, frameworks, and embedding those into the culture of our corporation, because we passionately believe that companies that operate to that level will outperform other companies in the future. We're also very passionate about what we call neo-governance models, which is an opportunity within itself, which is the digitization of corporate structures and organizations, which we call DAOs, which is either decentralized automated organizations. And we'll go into a little bit more about that. That's super geeky, I get that. And then the fifth thing that we're looking at is data as an asset class. And that really is where the potential for the financial revolution, for those of us who operate as fund managers and investors, it opens up a whole new asset class and a whole new way of structuring portfolios and constructing portfolios. And it was Citigroup, not me, that called that a financial revolution. So if we go to the next slide. So just to bring home the level of that opportunity, we have some data in the universe that says that Credit Suisse estimated that $256 trillion of real world assets exist that could be tokenized. Now that number is actually higher. It's just that I can remember 256 trillion. I think UBS released a report a few weeks ago saying it was 315 trillion, in fact. So what we're seeing is a trend, and forecasts from the World Economic Forum are showing that 10% of real assets will be tokenized by 2027. And we see this as a huge opportunity, both in our funds management business and as an asset origination business. Everybody would have heard of Bitcoin. A fun fact about us is we're the only listed company in Australia to have Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And that is a very big driver of our share price. And some people might say we're the OG Bitcoin company in Australia. We like to think we're a little bit more than that. But if you had to remember one thing about us today, I think it is the number of Bitcoin on our balance sheet. So even with the forecast of Web3 being, only 0.1% of the economy, what we're seeing right now, we're seeing a massive shift into that space. And we run a research document from our funds management team called the Shift List. And inside of that, we're seeing structural changes happen every single day throughout our industry that are mind-blowing. And the one that we had this week is that Swift are testing with a company called Chainlink how to put their transactions on the blockchain blockchain. Now, just consider Swift does 5 trillion transactions a day. And when we start getting that level of volume, we're really talking about a huge economic shift into what we call Web3. We've also had McDonald's starting to, take Bitcoin payments this week. Let's face it, when you can pay for a Big Mac in Bitcoin, we're nearly there, right? If we skip to the next slide, please. Great. As I've come into this role, which I started in February, one of the things I've worked on with the team is to create some long-term strategic objectives and to be really articulate about our roadmap for the future. So what we're aiming for is to be the #1 in our industry across 5 main areas. That is impact, to grow long-term shareholder value, to build and to be the builders of new digital finance. We have a development team and we're very passionate about building and walking the talk. We aim to be #1 in transaction volume in real-world asset tokens, and we aim to be the #1 investor in real-world asset tokens. Next slide, please. So how does that translate into short-term revenue objectives and bringing value home for shareholders? So we've got 3 main businesses that we're integrating in the new strategy, which we'll go through that revenue model in a minute. But our short-term revenue drivers and objectives are, we own a share trading business called Sell My Shares, which at the moment is sort of flying under the radar. And what we're doing is we're growing that across two playing fields. The first one is deceased estates. For people who inherit shares and don't have brokerage accounts, we can do one-off share sales for them. And then this week we've begun testing a T0 product, which is actually a 0-time settlement for share sales, which we see is truly exciting to uplift our revenue. The second revenue driver is we've built an ETH staking node, which can earn revenue doing what we call data validation in the proof of stake world. And I don't want to get too super geeky about that. What I will say is that we have assets on our treasury that have previously returned 0, other than the movement in the price of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And now we'll earn a 5% yield from staking those assets. One of the key differentiators we have in that market is that people are starting to look at the geographic splits of validation nodes, and we're one of the only nodes in Australia. So that gives us a little bit of a competitive advantage for those who want to operate in Australia. We also own a RegTech business, which we work with the ASX, and we've built across the ASX Symphony platform called Drawbridge. And this is something that we're building to be the Web3 gateway for corporates. Our first initiative is for directors of listed companies to be able to register their shares on Drawbridge, and we basically tell them when blackout periods are and stop them from buying or selling shares in their headstock so that they don't commit insider trading. So it's like a RegTech safety net, if you like. The fourth revenue generator is the fund business. We currently have 2 funds, which is a Bitcoin fund and a crypto fund. And we have a new fund product which we're launching, which capitalizes on that trend I spoke to you about earlier, 256 trillion of real world assets. We are building a real world asset tokenization fund, which we're very excited about. We also have ventures on our balance sheet, and we own some small and interesting asset tokenization plays, and we will be expanding those venture initiatives and supporting the Australian initiative. Part of what we do there is we're part of the digital finance CRC with the government. We're doing a little bit of work with them with the RBA Central Bank Digital Currency Project, and we've also got a number of other initiatives that we're building and supporting in the Australian industry. And I'm also on the board of the commercialization committee for that. Next slide, please. Right, so this revenue model. So what we see in this transition to Web3 really is this supercharging of data as an asset class, and we see that as a real economic opportunity. So we're building our revenue model by having that as the foundation of what we do. So we have an innovation culture, we have a development team, and we innovate to create new product and to leverage that into our data validation and services. Now, an example of that, because that might sound a little bit out there, is in our real world asset tokenization fund. our investment process is actually a data validation process. All of the investment data that creates that asset sits on data nodes or decentralized data nodes, for example, Chainlink, which has been called the Google of Web3. And those assets get validated on those data nodes. We validate the token. Then we originate that token by creating a real world asset token. We invest in that token, and we do that through our funds. And we can also now Next and Beyond, which is our mantra for our strategy, transact that token into Web3. Right now, what that looks like in the transaction realm is the Sell My Shares business. I was talking about that. And we are building the business in the now, Next and Beyond realm. So right now, we're originating, validating the data, innovating the tokens, and using the and then raising money through the funds. Now I see Tim jump on there, so I'll just skip to the next slide and finish up, which is our product roadmap. Really, I've gone through that: Sell My Shares, asset tokenization, data validation, and now I'm finished. Thanks, Tim.
We could be here a long time, Lisa, with this industry. I mean, it is a brand new industry. How do you focus your business in regards? You've got lots of different divisions there. Is it a revenue focus? Is it product driven? And how big's the team you have behind you?
Yeah, so right now our mantra is revenue, revenue, revenue. And that is driven from, we do have a product team, and we have revenue initiatives across the Sell My Shares business, which is T0, the funds business, which is, bread and butter, bringing new clients in, and then the data validation stake. And we tie that all together with this Web3 thematic. There's 18 people in the business, and we have a wonderful development team in Perth, and then we have our funds team in Sydney. So we sort of split into those two areas. And one of the things we're really doing is building these cross-functional teams and working together to really innovate, as the innovation is the foundation of what we do. So we're super focused.
And can you tell us a little bit more about the funds management business and the opportunity for investors to invest in crypto, I assume?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a wholesale fund, and we've got two funds. We've got a Bitcoin fund and we've got a top 20 crypto fund. And really where we see the Bitcoin fund is about access for anybody who needs to access through the traditional MIS infrastructure. And then the crypto fund, we really pride ourselves on being a safe pair of hands. Not all crypto is created equal. And what our team does is they do extensive equity style research into this new and nascent industry. And we really invest in the opportunities that we see emerging. And what we pride ourselves on is finding, tokens inside the top 100 that we believe will move into the top 20, and Chainlink is a great example of that. What we're really doing is the work, and it's a highly volatile investment space. I've never seen anything like it. And what we're doing is providing a quality of research for people who want to invest.
And do you think it'll be regulation? I know the SEC in the States is talking about regulating the industry. Do you think that will help it become mainstream?
Oh, yeah. Look, we participate in the regulatory conversation in Australia. Regulation to us is hugely important. We believe it's very necessary because there is a lot of divergence in the industry, and, there's just a very big divergence of actors in the industry, and we believe it needs to be regulated, and we welcome and are excited about regulation. And obviously it's a huge topic globally. We did a panel for Bloomberg during the week, and I listened to Steve Vallis explain the global regulatory landscape, and I broke it down into Europe has very detailed regulation coming. China's banning everything. The rest of Asia is a free-for-all. The US is suing everybody, and Australia's writing a report. And so Australia's contribution is a token taxonomy, which I think is hugely important. And I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago in Europe, and I asked the panel what they thought was the most important thing in regulation. And it was across the board a token taxonomy. So I'm actually really proud of Australia and our contribution to the global regulatory conversation.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the industry, Lisa. I'd love to get more content from yourself and your team just to share with our audience. I think a lot of people are ignorant about it. A lot of people are scared about it because of the volatility, but it's a critical pathway moving forward, I think, that education and keeping people informed.
Absolutely. And if I was to leave one thing in the space, it really is that when you select the right crypto opportunities, what you're investing in is building the new financial rails of the future. And there is a way to operate in this space. Yes, it's volatile, but if you can take a long-term view, there are great investment opportunities.
Thanks, Lisa. I'll follow up. I'd love to get some content from you. Thanks for your time. Have a nice weekend.
Bye-bye.